Lieutenant Jake had been stationed on Orbital Platform 7 for exactly 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. He knew this because he had been counting every single one of them. The massive space station floated in the void between two solar systems, serving as a meeting point for dozens of alien species who wanted to trade, negotiate, or simply avoid killing each other for a few hours. Jake's job was simple. He sat in a small room filled with screens and buttons, and he made sure the communication systems worked properly. When a message came in from Earth, he made sure it went to the right person. When an alien ambassador wanted to send a transmission to their home world, he made sure the signal was clear. It was boring work, but it paid well and kept him far away from the wars that still raged in certain parts of the galaxy. Today had been particularly long. A solar flare had disrupted half the relay stations, and Jake had spent 12 hours rerouting signals, adjusting frequencies, and apologizing to angry diplomats whose messages had been delayed. By the time his shift ended, his eyes burned from staring at screens and his back ached from sitting in his uncomfortable chair. All he wanted was to find the human recreational wing, grab a cold drink, and watch the recording of last week's World Cup match. His friend Danny had promised not to spoil the results, and Jake had been looking forward to this moment for days. The problem was that 7 was enormous. The station stretched for miles in every direction, a maze of corridors, chambers, and sections designed by engineers who clearly hated people who needed to walk anywhere. Each species had their own area, customized for their specific needs. The section was kept warm and humid. The crystalline collective zone was freezing cold. The human areas were somewhere in between, but finding them required navigating through a confusing mess of identical-looking hallways. Jake had memorized the route to the rec room. Left at the blue marker, straight past the trading hub, right at the fountain that smelled like copper, and then through the door marked with the Earth symbol. He had walked this path dozens of times. But tonight, something was different. Maybe it was the exhaustion clouding his brain. Maybe someone had moved the markers. Maybe the station's AI had decided to rearrange the corridors just to mess with him. Whatever the reason, Jake found himself standing in front of a door he did not recognize. It looked like the entrance to the rec room. The shape was right. The size was right. There was even a symbol on the front, though in the dim lighting, Jake could not quite make it out. He pressed his palm against the access panel, and the door slid open. Steam billowed out, thick and warm and scented with something sweet and unfamiliar. Jake blinked, trying to see through the haze. This was definitely not the rec room. The rec room did not have steam. The rec room did not smell like flowers. The rec room did not have a pool in the center filled with water that glowed faintly purple. And the rec room definitely did not have a naked alien woman standing in the middle of it. She was tall, incredibly tall. Jake was 6 feet even, and this woman would have towered over him by at least a foot, maybe more. Her skin shifted colors as he watched, moving between shades of deep violet and midnight blue like oil on water. 2 pairs of horns curved up from her head, elegant and sharp, and her hair, if it could be called hair, flowed down her back like liquid silver. She had 4 eyes. All 4 of them were now staring directly at Jake. For approximately 2 seconds, neither of them moved. Jake's brain, exhausted and confused, struggled to process what he was seeing. The alien woman's brain, apparently, processed things much faster. She screamed. It was not a human scream. It was higher, sharper, and seemed to contain words in a language that Jake's universal translator could not understand. Her skin flashed bright red, a color he would later learn indicated extreme anger, and she lunged for something on a shelf beside the pool. Jake saw the plasma pistol in her hand, and finally his survival instincts kicked in. He threw himself backward just as the first shot burned through the air where his head had been. The energy bolt hit the doorframe and turned the metal into glowing slag. Jake hit the floor hard, scrambled to his feet, and ran. More shots followed. The corridor lit up with flashes of blue-white light as plasma bolts screamed past him, missing by inches. Jake had never run so fast in his life. He did not think about direction. He did not think about getting lost. He only thought about putting as much distance as possible between himself and the angry alien with the gun. A bolt hit the wall next to his shoulder, close enough that he felt the heat through his uniform. He ducked, nearly tripped, caught himself, and kept running. Behind him, he heard her shouting. The translator still could not make sense of the words, but the tone was clear enough. She was furious. She was chasing him, and she was still shooting. Jake rounded a corner and slammed directly into something solid. He bounced off and landed on his back, staring up at what he had hit. It was another alien, the same species as the woman but male. This one was even taller than her, easily 8 feet, with muscles that looked like they could bend steel. His horns were massive, spreading out from his head like the branches of a dead tree. In his hand, he held a staff that crackled with energy. 2 more guards appeared behind the big one, both carrying weapons. Jake raised his hand slowly. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. The woman came around the corner a moment later. She had wrapped herself in a flowing robe, but her plasma pistol was still in her hand and still pointed at Jake's face. Up close, he could see that all 4 of her golden eyes were narrowed with fury. Her skin had not returned to its normal color. It was still that angry, violent red. The big male guard spoke first. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You are the human who violated the Empress daughter's privacy." It was not a question. Jake kept his hands up. His voice came out smaller than he would have liked. "It was an accident. The doors looked the same. I was trying to find the rec room. I wanted to watch soccer." "Soccer?" The guard's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "It's a game. Humans kick a ball around. It's not important. What's important is that I made a mistake, a very innocent mistake. I did not mean to walk in there. I did not mean to see anything. If I could unsee it, I would. Believe me, I really, really would." The woman stepped closer. Her pistol did not waver. "You saw me unclothed, human. Do you understand what that means among my people?" Jake had a feeling he was about to find out, and he was equally sure he was not going to like the answer. "I'm guessing it's bad." "Bad?" she laughed, but there was no humor in it. For an unbonded male to witness a noble female's unclothed form is one of the gravest insults possible. It is a violation of her honor, a stain upon her house. It demands blood. Blood seems a bit extreme for an accident. Intention does not matter. The act is what counts. The big guard grabbed Jake's arm and hauled him to his feet like he weighed nothing. His grip was like iron. "You will come with us, human. The High Lord will decide your fate." Jake did not resist. There was no point. He was one tired, unarmed communications officer against 3 armed guards and a furious princess. The math did not work out in his favor. As they marched him through the corridors, the woman walked beside him. Her pistol was finally holstered, but her expression remained cold. "What's your name?" Jake asked. He was not sure why he asked it. Maybe because he wanted to know the name of the person responsible for his probably upcoming death. She looked at him with something that might have been surprise. "You speak to me." "Well, we're walking together." Seemed rude to stay silent. "I am El, daughter of High Lord Ran, 3rd in line to the throne of the Empire." "That's a lot of titles." "And you are?" "Lieutenant Jake. I work in communications. I fix broken radios and apologize to angry diplomats. I have 0 titles." El made a sound that might have been amusement or might have been contempt. Jake could not tell. "You are strange for a human." "I've been told that before, usually by other humans." They walked the rest of the way in silence. The throne room of the delegation was exactly as terrifying as Jake had expected, maybe more so. The ceiling stretched up so high that it vanished into shadows. Massive columns of dark crystal lined the walls, each one carved with symbols that seemed to move when Jake was not looking directly at them. The floor was black stone, polished to a mirror shine, and bioluminescent plants in the corners cast everything in an eerie blue glow. At the far end of the room sat a throne carved from a single piece of what looked like obsidian. On that throne sat the biggest Jake had seen yet. High Lord Ran was a mountain of a being. His shoulders were broad enough to block a doorway. His horns branched out in complex patterns that suggested great age and power. His skin was a deep, royal purple that seemed to absorb the light around it, and his four eyes, fixed on Jake with an intensity that made his knees weak, held no warmth whatsoever. The guards forced Jake to his knees before the throne. Elle took her place at her father's right side, still glaring at Jake like he was something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. "Lieutenant Jake of Earth," the High Lord said. His voice was thunder. It echoed off the walls and made Jake's bones vibrate. "You have committed a grave offense against the honor of my house." Jake cleared his throat. His mouth was very dry. "Your Excellency, I want to explain that this was entirely an accident. The steam, the similar doors, the confusing layout of this station. I never meant to intrude. I never meant to see anything. If there was a way to take it back, I would. In a heartbeat." "Silence." Jake, shut up. "By the laws of my people, the punishment for your crime is death. Specifically, death by the ceremony of 10,000 cuts. You will be brought before the entire court. You will be bound, and you will be cut 10,000 times slowly over the course of many days. At no point will the cuts be deep enough to kill you quickly. You will feel every single one." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. His stomach turned over. "That seems very thorough. Our laws are ancient. Our punishments are severe. This is how we have maintained our honor for 10,000 generations." The High Lord leaned forward slightly. "However, there is one alternative." Jake perked up immediately. Anything was better than 10,000 cuts. At least he hoped it was. "I'll take it. Whatever it is, I'll do it. I'll clean floors. I'll polish crystals. I'll learn to make whatever you eat and cook it for you every day for the rest of my life. Just please don't cut me into pieces." "Father," Elle's voice was sharp, "you cannot be considering what I think you're considering. The law is clear, daughter. If you wish to reject this alternative, the human will die. That is your right, but consider the consequences. The humans are useful trading partners. Their government may take offense if we execute one of their officers over an accident. It could damage our alliance." "Then let them be offended. He violated my privacy. He saw me in my most vulnerable state. How can I ever recover from such shame?" "By transforming that shame into power." The High Lord's eyes returned to Jake. "By the ancient customs of when an unbonded male witnesses the unclothed form of an unbonded noble female, he has two choices: death or the binding of honor." Jake waited. His heart hammered against his ribs. "You will marry my daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Jake could hear his own blood rushing in his ears. He could hear the soft hum of the bioluminescent plants. He could hear, somewhere in the distance, the faint vibration of the station's engines. What he could not hear was any indication that the High Lord was joking. "I'm sorry," Jake finally managed. "Could you say that again? Because it sounded like you said marriage." "That is correct." "To your daughter?" "Yes." "The one who shot at me, multiple times, and hit the wall approximately 3 inches from my face?" "The very same." Jake looked at Elle. Her skin had gone through several color changes in rapid succession, and had now settled on a shade that was somewhere between furious red and orange. Her 4 eyes were wide with disbelief. "Father, this is madness," she said. "He is a human, a lesser species. They live barely 100 years. They cannot even breathe properly without mechanical assistance. They think kicking a ball around is entertainment. This one walked into my private chambers because he cannot read basic signage." "The signage was in script," Jake protested. "How was I supposed to read it? I don't even know what language you people speak." "Then learn primitive." "Enough," the High Lord's voice silenced them both. "The law is clear. Lieutenant, you have 1 solar cycle to make your decision. Marriage to my daughter or death by 10,000 cuts. Consider your options carefully." The guards grabbed Jake again and dragged him out of the throne room. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was Elle, still standing beside her father's throne, looking at him with an expression that promised suffering either way. They put him in what they called guest quarters. It looked exactly like a prison cell. Small, windowless, with a hard bed built into the wall and a bathroom so cramped he could barely turn around. The door locked from the outside, and Jake had no doubt there were guards stationed in the corridor. He sat on the bed and put his head in his hands. "This is not happening," he said to the empty room. "This cannot actually be happening." But it absolutely was. He had walked through the wrong door. He had seen an alien princess naked, and now he had to choose between marrying her or being tortured to death. His mother had told him to become a dentist. She had said space was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too full of things that could kill you in creative ways. He had laughed at her concerns. He had said the worst thing that could happen was boredom. He owed his mother a very large apology. 3 hours passed. Jake spent them lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how his life had gone so spectacularly wrong. He thought about his career, probably over. He thought about his friends back home, who would never believe this story. He thought about the World Cup match he had never gotten to watch. Mostly, though, he thought about the 2 options in front of him. Death was straightforward. Horrible, painful, and final, but straightforward. He would suffer, he would die, and his problems would be over. Not ideal, but at least he understood it. Marriage was more complicated. He did not know what it meant to be married to a. He did not know what would be expected of him. He did not know if Elle would try to kill him in his sleep. He did not know anything about her people, her culture, or her family, except that they took privacy very seriously and had extremely violent punishments for those who violated it. But he would be alive. That was something. That was actually quite a lot. The door to his cell opened, and Jake sat up quickly. The woman who entered was human. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was lined with the kind of wrinkles that came from spending too much time worrying about things. She wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and her expression suggested that Jake had just become her least favorite person in the entire galaxy. "Lieutenant," she said, settling into the room's only chair while Jake remained on the bed. "I am Ambassador. I'm in charge of human interests on this station." "Ambassador, thank you for coming." "Don't thank me yet." She crossed her arms. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Walked through the wrong door. You've created an intergalactic incident that could destroy 2 years of trade negotiations with the Empire. Do you know what the control? The Orion Passage. It's the fastest route between human space and the Outer Rim. Without their cooperation, our expansion plans are set back by decades. Shipping costs triple. Military logistics become a nightmare. And you've put all of that at risk because you couldn't find the rec room." Jake winced. "When you put it that way, it sounds really bad." "It is really bad. It's catastrophically bad. I've been fielding calls from Earth Command all night. The ambassador to Earth has already filed a formal complaint. There are people in very high positions who are very, very angry with you right now." "I'm sorry, I really am. It was an accident." "I know it was an accident. Everyone knows it was an accident. Unfortunately, law doesn't care about accidents. They care about honor, and you've insulted theirs in a very public way." Ambassador rubbed her temples like she was fighting off a headache. "I've been in contact with our government. Their official position is that you should do whatever is necessary to preserve our alliance with the... Jake stared at her. They want me to marry an alien princess. They want you to not start a war. This is insane. Marriage, to someone I've never met, to someone who tried to kill me, that's your government's solution. The alternative is letting them execute you. That would also cause problems, but smaller problems. They would see it as justice. We would have to file protests, but eventually things would calm down. She paused. Of course, you would be dead. I noticed that part. So you have a choice. Die for your mistake or live with the consequences. Jake stood up and paced the small room. 3 steps to the wall, 3 steps back. It was all the space he had. How does marriage even work? Is it permanent? What would I have to do? Ambassador pulled out a small tablet and consulted some notes. I've been researching since this mess started. Marriage, or the binding of honor as they call it, is a serious commitment. It's normally made between 2 people who have known each other for years, with the blessing of both families. It involves a blood ceremony that somehow connects the 2 parties on a deeper level. After that, you're bound together. For how long? Normally, for life. Live for about 300 years, and their marriages are expected to last the entire time. She must have seen the panic on Jake's face because she quickly continued. However, there is an exception. If a marriage is made under circumstances of honor restoration rather than genuine affection, it can be dissolved after 5 years by mutual agreement. 5 years. I have to be married to her for 5 years. It's better than being dead for eternity. Jake could not argue with that math. He sat back down on the bed, his mind racing. 5 years. That was a long time to be married to someone who hated him, but it was also a finite time. There was an end point. There was a possibility, however distant, that he could survive this and come out the other side with his life intact. What happens during those 5 years? He asked. What would I have to do? You would be expected to live with her, to appear with her at public functions, to present a united front to the people. The ambassador checked her notes again. There's no requirement for physical intimacy. The marriage is more about social appearance than personal connection, at least in cases like this. That was something, at least. And after 5 years, if both parties agree that the marriage was made in error, it can be dissolved without dishonor to either side. She goes her way, you go yours. Consider the honor debt paid, and everyone moves on. Jake thought about it. 5 years of awkward coexistence with an alien princess who would probably never forgive him for seeing her naked. 5 years of learning a new culture, new customs, new expectations. 5 years away from everything he knew. But 5 years was not forever. 5 years was survivable. I need to talk to her, Jake said suddenly. Before I make any decision, I need to talk to Elle. Ambassador raised an eyebrow. You want to talk to the woman who tried to shoot you? If I'm going to marry her, I want to at least know what I'm getting into. And if she absolutely refuses, then this whole discussion is pointless anyway. The ambassador considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll see what I can arrange. It might take some time. I have 1 solar cycle. How long is that in human time? About 32 hours. Then I've got time. Ambassador left, and Jake was alone again with his thoughts. The request went through faster than Jake expected. Maybe they were curious about him. Maybe they wanted to give Elle a chance to talk him out of the marriage option. Maybe they just enjoyed watching humans squirm. Whatever the reason, permission was granted within 2 hours. They took him to a garden. Jake had not expected gardens on a space station, but the section was full of surprises. This one was small, enclosed within high walls of dark stone, with a ceiling that displayed a simulation of an alien sky. Strange flowers bloomed in colors that hurt to look at directly, reds and oranges and purples so vivid they seemed to pulse with their own light. The air was thick with scents Jake could not identify, sweet and spicy and faintly metallic. Elle sat on a bench carved from pale stone, waiting for him. She looked different than she had in the throne room, less angry, more tired. Her skin had settled into a calm blue-violet, and her 4 golden eyes watched him approach with something that might have been curiosity. She did not have her plasma pistol. Jake noticed that immediately and felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. He stopped a respectful distance from her bench and waited. "You asked to speak with me," she said. Her voice was different too, softer, less sharp. "I did, thank you for agreeing. I was curious. Most humans who face execution do not ask to meet their potential executioner. I'm hoping you're my potential wife, actually, though I guess you could be both." Elle made a sound that Jake was beginning to recognize as her version of laughter. It was quiet, musical, like wind chimes in a light breeze. "Sit," she said, gesturing to another bench across from her. "We might as well be comfortable while we discuss this madness." Jake sat. He kept his hands visible and tried to look as non-threatening as possible, which was not difficult. He was very aware that she could probably kill him with her bare hands if she wanted to. "I want to start by apologizing again," he said. "Not because I'm scared of dying, although I definitely am, but because what happened was wrong, even if it was an accident. I violated your privacy. I embarrassed you. I put you in an impossible position. For all of that, I am genuinely sorry." Elle studied him for a long moment. Her eyes searched his face as if looking for deception. "You speak as though you mean the words." "I do mean them. Where I come from, walking in on someone like that is one of the most embarrassing things that can happen, to both people. I've been cringing about it since the moment it happened." Cringing. It's a thing humans do when we're extremely embarrassed. We kind of fold in on ourselves and wish we could disappear. It's happening to me right now, actually. Another quiet laugh from Elle. This time, there was a hint of warmth in it. "You are not what I expected from a human." "What did you expect?" "Arrogance, aggression. Your species has a reputation among the elder races. You spread quickly. You fight constantly. You take what you want without considering the consequences. When your kind first came to our station, we expected conflict. We prepared for it. And what did you get instead? Trade negotiations, cultural exchanges, technical cooperation." She paused. "And one lost communications officer who cannot read signage in a foreign language." Jake found himself smiling despite everything. "That does sound like us. We're unpredictable." "Yes, you are." They sat in silence for a moment. The strange flowers swayed in an artificial breeze, and somewhere in the distance, Jake could hear the soft sound of water flowing. "I've been thinking about the marriage option," he said finally. "As have I." Elle's expression hardened slightly. "I do not wish to be bound to a human. No offense to you personally, but this situation is impossible. You are not of my species. You do not know our ways. You would be a constant reminder of the most humiliating moment of my life." "I understand. I wouldn't want to marry me either under these circumstances." "Then why are you here? To convince me otherwise." Jake shook his head. "I'm here because I wanted to meet you, to talk to you, to understand what I'd be getting into if I said yes." He leaned forward slightly. "And maybe to propose a different way of looking at this." Elle raised one eyebrow. It was a surprisingly human gesture. "Explain." "Your father said this marriage could be dissolved after 5 years if both parties agree. That means it's not permanent, it's temporary, a fixed term with a clear end point." Jake took a breath. "So what if we treat it that way, not as a real marriage but as a strategic alliance, a partnership of convenience?" "Go on." "We go through with the ceremony. We make it official and public. We satisfy your people's laws and protect the alliance between your empire and mine. And then we spend the next 5 years figuring out how to coexist peacefully until we can end this without any diplomatic damage." Elle was quiet for a long time. Her skin shifted through several colors, too fast for Jake to interpret. "You propose a performance," she finally said. "A show for the public while we remain strangers in private." "Not strangers, I'm hoping for something better than that." Jake met her golden eyes directly. "Look, we're going to be living together for 5 years. That's a long time to be miserable, so why not try to actually get along, learn about each other, maybe even become friends? It would make the whole thing a lot easier for both of us." "Friends?" She said the word like she was testing it. "You believe a princess and a human communications officer can become friends?" "I believe stranger things have happened. I once watched a silicon-based life form and a human win a three-legged race together. At this point, I think anything is possible." Elle stared at him. Her expression was unreadable, but her skin was slowly shifting toward a calmer shade of blue. "You are very odd, Jake." "Is that a yes?" "It is not a no." She stood up from her bench and extended her hand toward him, palm down. "I will consider your proposal. If I agree, we will do this your way. A strategic alliance, a partnership of equals, and at the end of 5 years we will part without dishonor." Jake stood and pressed his palm against hers. Her skin was cool and smooth, and up close, he could see the subtle patterns that rippled through it like waves on a pond. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Do not thank me yet. 5 years is a long time, and I still have not forgiven you for what you saw." "I know. I'll spend those 5 years making it up to you." "See that you do." She her hand and turned to leave but paused at the garden's entrance. "One more thing, human." "Yes." "If you ever enter my bathing chamber again, I will not aim to miss." Jake believed her completely. The announcement came the next morning. The binding of honor between Elle, daughter of High Lord Ran, and Lieutenant Jake of Earth would take place in 3 days' time. All relevant parties were expected to attend. Formal attire was required. Jake spent those 3 days in a crash course on customs. Ambassador brought in experts, translators, and cultural advisors who taught him everything they could in the limited time available. He learned how to bow properly, how to address nobles of various ranks, and how to eat without insulting anyone. He learned the significance of skin color changes and horn decorations. He learned the proper way to accept gifts, refuse insults, and walk through doorways. He also learned more about the woman he was about to marry. Elle was 237 years old, which was considered young for but made Jake's 31 years seem laughable. She had been educated in politics, combat, and diplomacy since childhood. She spoke 14 languages fluently and had visited more planets than Jake could name. She was third in line to the throne of an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. And she was about to be bound for life to a guy who fixed radios for a living. The irony was not lost on Jake. On the day of the ceremony, they dressed him in traditional groom attire. It involved layers of black fabric that felt like silk but stronger, silver clasps that were cold against his skin, and a headdress that kept sliding forward no matter how many times the attendants adjusted it. He looked ridiculous. He felt ridiculous. But when he saw himself in the mirror, he also looked like someone who was taking this seriously. Someone who respected the gravity of what was happening. That was something. The ceremonial hall was packed. Thousands have filled the viewing galleries, their skins rippling with colors that created a moving rainbow across the crowd. The human delegation was much smaller, maybe 50 people in total, but they occupied a prominent position near the front. Ambassador sat in the center, flanked by military officers and diplomats who all wore expressions of carefully controlled concern. Jake walked down the central aisle alone. His footsteps echoed on the black stone floor. Every eye in the room was on him, and he had never felt more exposed in his life. He reached the altar at the front of the hall and took his place. High Lord Rand stood behind it, dressed in ceremonial robes that made him look even larger and more intimidating than before. Beside him stood priests or officials of some kind, holding staffs and wearing expressions of supreme solemnity. Then the music changed. Jake turned, and everything else faded away. Elle entered from the far end of the hall, and she was beautiful. She wore white, layer upon layer of fabric so fine it seemed to float around her as she moved. Her horns had been decorated with tiny crystals that caught the light and scattered it into rainbow fragments. Her 4 eyes were outlined in silver paint that made them glow like actual gold. Her skin had settled into a deep, rich purple that seemed to radiate its own light. She was nothing like the angry woman who had shot at him in the steam-filled chamber. She was nothing like the tired, wary princess he had spoken to in the garden. She was something else entirely, something Jake could not look away from. Elle reached the altar and took her place beside him. For a moment, their eyes met. "You look terrified," she murmured, quiet enough that only he could hear. "I look like someone dumped me in a costume shop and hoped for the best," he whispered back. "You look incredible." All 4 of her eyes blinked rapidly, which Jake had learned was the equivalent of blushing. "Silence," she said, but there was no anger in it. "The ceremony is beginning." High Lord Rand stepped forward and began to speak in formal. Jake's translator rendered it as flowery and poetic, full of references to ancestors, honor, and the binding of 2 souls. He listened carefully, trying to follow along, but his attention kept drifting back to Elle beside him. She was nervous. He could see it in the subtle shifts of her skin color, the tiny movements of her hands. She was as scared of this as he was, maybe more. This was her culture, her family, her future being altered forever by his stupid mistake. Jake made a silent promise to himself. He would make this work. He would find a way to be the partner she deserved, even if he was not the partner she wanted. He owed her that much. The ceremony continued. There were prayers and chants and responses that Jake stumbled through with the help of his translator. There were blessings from the priests and acknowledgments from the crowd. There were moments of silence that stretched on forever and bursts of music that filled the hall with sound. Finally, the central moment arrived. High Lord Rand produced 2 small blades from within his robes. They were beautiful, delicate things, their edges gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse in time with Jake's heartbeat. "The blood bond," Elle said quietly. "We each make a small cut and press our palms together. It represents the joining of 2 lives into one." Jake looked at the blade in the High Lord's hand. It was sharp enough to cut through steel, probably, and he was supposed to use it on himself. "Will it work?" he asked. "Our blood is different. Is it safe?" "The blades are treated with a substance that neutralizes any harmful reactions. You will feel warmth, nothing more." The High Lord handed Jake one of the blades and gave the other to Elle. Their eyes met again. "Ready?" Jake asked. "No," she admitted, "but let us do this anyway." Jake pressed the blade against his palm and drew it across. The cut was shallow, but enough to produce a line of red blood. Beside him, Elle did the same, her blood a deep indigo that was almost black. They turned to face each other. This was the moment, the point of no return. Once their blood mixed, they would be bound together, and nothing could undo it except time and mutual agreement. Jake extended his bleeding hand. Elle extended hers. Their palms pressed together. The warmth Elle had described spread up Jake's arm immediately. It was gentle at first, like holding a cup of warm tea, but it grew stronger as the seconds passed. It moved through his chest, into his head, down his spine. For a moment he felt something else, something that was not him. A presence, a connection, like a door opening somewhere deep inside his mind. He looked at Elle and saw his own surprise reflected in her golden eyes. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. "Yes," her voice was equally quiet. "I did not expect it to be so strong." High Lord Rand's voice boomed across the hall. "Bound in blood, bound in honor, bound until death or dissolution. Let none challenge what has been joined this day." The crowd erupted in sound. Cheers, chants, and something that sounded like singing all merged together into a wave of noise that washed over Jake and left him breathless. He was still holding Elle's hand, their blood still mingling, and he had no idea what to do next. She solved the problem for him. She her hand slowly, deliberately, and turned to face the crowd. Jake did the same, standing beside his new wife as they celebrated their union. Ambassador caught his eye from the human section. She gave him a small nod that might have been approval or might have been relief. Either way, it was something. The reception that followed was a blur of food, drink, and conversation. Jake ate dishes he could not identify and drank beverages that made his head spin pleasantly. He accepted congratulations from beings he had never met and would probably never see again. He smiled until his face hurt and bowed until his back ached. Through it all, Elle remained at his side. His wife. The word still felt strange, unreal. But she was there, introducing him to important people, guiding him through customs he did not understand, covering his mistakes with grace and diplomacy. "You're good at this," Jake told her during a brief moment alone. "I have been trained for public appearances since childhood. And I've been trained to fix communication relays. I think you got the short end of this bargain." "Perhaps," she looked at him with an expression he could not quite read, "but you are trying. That is more than I expected. I told you I would make this up to you." "You did. I am beginning to think you might actually mean it." The reception stretched on for hours. By the time it finally ended, Jake was exhausted in a way he had never experienced before. Every muscle in his body ached. His head was foggy from the alien drinks. His feet felt like they might fall off. But it was done. He was married, and he was still alive. They were escorted to their new quarters, a suite in the neutral zone of the station that had been designed to accommodate both human and comfort. The temperature was warmer than Jake preferred, the lighting dimmer than he was used to, and the furniture was all slightly too large for him. It was not home, but it was something. Elle walked around the room slowly, examining everything with careful attention. Jake stayed near the door, uncertain of what to do. "I want to establish some ground rules," she said finally, turning to face him. "Absolutely, ground rules are good. First, you will not enter any room without announcing yourself first. I do not care if the door is open, if you believe the room is empty, if you can see inside clearly. You will knock and wait for permission." "Done, no problem." "Second, we will present a united front in all public settings. Whatever disagreements we have will be resolved privately. We will never argue in front of others." "Also done. Diplomacy is important, I get that." "Third," she hesitated, her skin shifting through several colors before settling back to calm purple. "I would like to learn about your people, your customs, your history. If we are to spend 5 years together, I want to understand you." Jake felt something warm in his chest that had nothing to do with the blood bond. "I'd like that too, to learn about you, I mean, and your people, everything." "Then we have an agreement." She extended her hand again, palm down. Jake pressed his palm against hers, completing the gesture. It felt different this time, easier, more natural. "One more thing," Jake said, not letting go of her hand. "Yes. I really am sorry about the bath thing. I know I've said it before and I'll probably say it again, but I want you to understand how much I mean it. That was a terrible way to meet, and I wish I could change it." Elle was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, that musical wind chime sound that Jake was beginning to enjoy hearing. "It was terrible," she agreed. "The worst first meeting in the history of our species, but perhaps it led somewhere that will not be so terrible. We will see." "We will see," Jake echoed. She her hand and moved toward one of the bedrooms. At the door she paused. "Good night, Jake." "Good night, Elle." The door closed behind her, and Jake was alone in the common room of their shared quarters. Outside the viewport, Stars wheeled slowly past against the backdrop of infinite space. He had walked through the wrong door. He had seen an alien princess naked. He had been threatened with torture and death. And now he was married. His mother had really been right about the dentist thing. But as Jake settled onto the too large couch and watched the stars drift by, he found that he was not as unhappy as he probably should have been. The situation was insane. The circumstances were impossible. But Elle was not what he had expected. She was smart and capable and surprisingly willing to work with him despite everything that had happened. Maybe this would not be a disaster. Maybe, with time and effort and a lot of patience, they could actually make this work. Or maybe she would kill him in his sleep. Either way, it was going to be an interesting 5 years. Jake closed his eyes and let sleep take him, dreaming of strange flowers and golden eyes and doors that all looked exactly the same. The first month was the hardest. Jake and Elle circled each other like wary animals, polite but distant. They shared meals in awkward silence, exchanged basic pleasantries, and retreated to their separate rooms as soon as possible. The quarters felt too small and too large at the same time, crowded with tension and empty of connection. Jake continued his work in communications, grateful for the distraction. His colleagues treated him differently now, with a mixture of curiosity and respect that he had not earned and did not want. He was the guy who had married a princess. The guy who had accidentally started an interstellar incident and somehow come out ahead. He hated the attention. Elle had her own duties, meetings with her father and his advisors, diplomatic functions, cultural events. She was often gone for hours at a time, and when she returned she was usually too tired to talk. Jake learned to read her skin colors, blue for calm, purple for contentment, for exhaustion. He saw a lot of. But slowly, gradually, things began to change. It started with small things. A shared joke over a particularly strange breakfast dish. A moment of genuine conversation about their respective childhoods. A game that Elle taught Jake using carved stones and complicated rules, which she won every single time. Jake started learning language, proper study, rather than just relying on the translator. He was terrible at it, but Elle seemed pleased by the effort. She corrected his pronunciation with only minimal mockery and taught him phrases that were not in any of the official language guides. In return, Jake taught her about Earth. He showed her pictures of his home city, a small town in Colorado that he had not visited in years. He played her music that made her tilt her head in confusion and movies that she analyzed with academic precision. He introduced her to coffee, which she declared was disgusting, and then drank an entire pot. "You humans are strange," she said one evening, watching Jake prepare another cup. "This substance is bitter and unpleasant and clearly has no nutritional value, yet you consume it constantly. It has caffeine, keeps us awake. Your species requires chemical assistance to maintain consciousness." "Pretty much, yeah, we're fragile like that." Elle made a sound that might have been sympathy or might have been amusement. "And yet you have spread across this galaxy like nothing we have ever seen. You have made alliances with species who have existed for millions of years. You have built stations and colonies and trade networks that span hundreds of light years." She shook her head slowly. "Perhaps there is something to be said for chemical assistance." Jake smiled and handed her another cup of coffee. By the second month, the awkwardness had begun to fade. They still had separate rooms and separate lives, but the space between them felt smaller somehow, more comfortable. Jake learned that Elle loved gardens. She could spend hours among the strange flowers of the station's green spaces, naming each species and explaining their properties. She had a favorite bench in the garden where they had first talked, and she often sat there when she needed to think. Elle learned that Jake loved stories. He read constantly, fiction and history and science and everything in between. He told her tales from Earth's past, legends and myths and true accounts of human achievement that made her 4 eyes widen with surprise. Your species climbed a mountain just because it was there, she asked one night, after Jake had told her about the first ascent of Mount Everest. Basically, yeah, we wanted to see if we could do it. And many of you died attempting this pointless climb. Lots of people still do, actually. Elle stared at him like he had grown a second head. This explains much about your species. Jake laughed. I've heard that before. The third month brought the first real crisis. A delegation from the Confederacy arrived at the station, representatives of a species that they had been at war with for centuries. The peace between them was fragile, maintained by careful diplomacy and occasional threats, and they made it very clear that they considered Jake's marriage to Elle to be an insult. They see it as contamination, Elle explained after a particularly tense diplomatic dinner. To them, humans are a young species with no culture and no history. For a princess to bind herself to one is a degradation. Should I be offended? Probably, I am offended on your behalf. Jake was touched by that, more than he expected to be. They continued to push. They made comments at formal functions, subtle insults that Jake did not always catch but that made Elle's skin flash angry red. They questioned the legitimacy of the marriage. They suggested that Jake was a spy, a plant, a weapon aimed at the heart of the royal family. It came to a head during a reception hosted by the station's governing council. A diplomat, a massive creature with 6 limbs and mandibles that clicked constantly, approached Jake while Elle was speaking with someone else. Human, they said, its voice a harsh rasp. You do not belong here. You do not deserve the honor you have been given. You should crawl back to your primitive planet and leave civilized species to their proper business. Jake had learned enough about galactic etiquette to know that this was a deliberate provocation. They wanted him to react, to embarrass himself and by extension, Elle, to give them evidence that humans were indeed the barbarians they claimed. He took a slow breath. I appreciate your concern for my well-being, Jake said, keeping his voice calm. But I think I'll stay. The food here is much better than anything we have on my primitive planet. The mandibles clicked faster, a sign of irritation. You mock me, human. I wouldn't dream of it. I'm just making conversation. They leaned closer, close enough that Jake could smell something like sulfur on its breath. Your species is a mistake, an accident of evolution that will be corrected in time. Enjoy your borrowed position while you can, human. It will not last. That's an interesting theory. I have a different one. And what is that? Jake smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I think you're scared. I think your Confederacy has watched humanity spread across this galaxy and realized that you don't know how to stop us. We're too adaptable, too determined, too willing to do whatever it takes to survive. He leaned forward slightly. And now a human is married to a princess. Now we're connected to one of the most powerful empires in known space. That must keep you up at night. They went very still, its 6 eyes fixed on Jake with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Then Elle was there, appearing at Jake's side like she had materialized out of thin air. Her skin was deep purple, royal and commanding, and her golden eyes were cold as ice. Ambassador, she said, her voice carrying across the room, I trust you are enjoying our hospitality. The diplomat pulled back immediately. Whatever anger it had been feeling disappeared behind a mask of false politeness. Princess Elle, I was just speaking with your husband. So I heard. Elle's tone could have frozen plasma. I believe your delegation's quarters are in the Western Wing. Perhaps you would like to rest before the next event. It was a dismissal, a polite, formal, absolutely unmistakable dismissal. They had no choice but to accept it. It inclined its head stiffly, and its 6 legs carrying it away with barely concealed fury. When it was gone, Elle turned to Jake. Are you all right? Fine, it takes more than an angry bug to rattle me. That angry bug is the 2nd highest ranking diplomat in the Confederacy. It could cause serious problems for both our species. Then it shouldn't have started something it couldn't finish. Elle stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something Jake had never seen before. She smiled, a real smile, with all four eyes crinkling at the corners and her skin shifting to a warm gold that he had never seen on her before. "You are full of surprises, Jake." "I try." She took his arm, a gesture of solidarity, and they returned to the reception together. That night back in their quarters, Elle did not immediately retreat to her room. Instead, she sat on the couch in the common area, looking out at the stars. Jake sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance but closer than they usually got. "What you said to the diplomat," she said finally, "did you mean it?" "Which part?" "The part about humans being too adaptable to stop, too determined, too willing to do whatever it takes." Jake thought about it. "Yeah, I think I did. Humans aren't the strongest species in this galaxy. We're not the oldest or the most advanced, but we don't give up. We keep trying, keep pushing, keep finding new ways to survive. That's who we are." "I believe it." Elle turned to look at him, her golden eyes thoughtful. "My people have watched your species since you first left your planet. We were curious about you, but not impressed. You seemed fragile, short-lived, limited." "We are all those things." "Yes, but you are also relentless. In the centuries since your first, you have expanded further and faster than species that had millions of years head start. You have made alliances with enemies and turned rivals into partners. You have done things that should have been impossible again and again." She paused. "I am beginning to understand why." "Why?" "Because you do not know you are supposed to fail. You do not have the weight of history telling you what cannot be done, so you simply do it." Jake thought about Mount Everest, about the first humans to cross oceans in wooden ships, about the engineers who had built space stations with technology that barely worked and dreams that burned brighter than suns. "I guess that's pretty accurate." "It is impressive, in its own strange way." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars drift past. "I was proud of you tonight," Elle said suddenly. Jake blinked. "You were." "The way you handled the diplomat. You did not lose your temper. You did not back down. You stood your ground with dignity and intelligence. That is not what I expected from you." "What did you expect?" She smiled again, that warm golden expression that Jake was starting to enjoy seeing. "I am still not sure, but I am looking forward to finding out." The fourth month brought changes that neither of them expected. Ambassador requested a meeting with Jake alone. When he arrived at her office, she looked worried. "Lieutenant, please sit down." Jake sat. The worry in her voice made his stomach tighten. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly, but there's been a development that you should know about." She pulled up something on her tablet. "The marriage between you and Elle has become popular." "Popular?" "Among humans, back on Earth and in the colonies. The story has spread. The communications officer who accidentally started an intergalactic incident and then married an alien princess to prevent a war. People love it. Romantic, dramatic, very human." Jake was not sure how to feel about that. "I just did what I had to do. It wasn't romantic." "I know, but perception matters." Ambassador leaned forward. "The point is, your marriage has done more for human relations than any treaty or trade agreement ever could. People on both sides see it as a symbol, a sign that our species can work together on a personal level, not just a political one." "That's good, right?" "It is good, but it also puts pressure on you. If your marriage fails, if you and Elle separate after 5 years, it could be seen as a sign that our alliance is weaker than it appears. The political implications could be significant." Jake understood what she was saying, but he did not like it. "So we're not just married for our own sakes anymore. We're married for everyone." "Essentially, yes." He thought about Elle, about the progress they had made, about the friendship that was slowly developing between them. What if we don't separate after 5 years? Ambassador looked surprised. You're considering staying married permanently? I don't know, maybe. We've been talking about it, nothing serious, just the possibility. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Things are different now than they were at the beginning. We actually like each other, most of the time. That's wonderful news, Lieutenant, for personal and diplomatic reasons. The ambassador smiled for the first time since he had entered. I hope it works out. So do I. Jake went back to his quarters and found Elle waiting for him. She was sitting in her favorite spot by the viewport, a cup of the coffee she supposedly hated in her hands. How was your meeting with the ambassador? She asked. Interesting. Jake sat down beside her. Apparently we're famous. Famous? Our marriage. It's become a symbol of human cooperation. People on both sides are watching us. Elle's skin shifted to a thoughtful blue. I had heard rumors. My father mentioned something similar. How do you feel about it? She was quiet for a moment. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I did not ask to be a symbol. I did not choose this marriage, not really. It was forced on both of us by circumstance and custom. She paused. On the other hand, if our union can bring our peoples closer together, perhaps some good can come from this awkward situation. That's what I was thinking too. They sat together, watching the stars. Jake, Elle said finally, do you ever think about what happens after 5 years? Sometimes, do you? Often. She turned to look at him, her four golden eyes serious. When we first made our agreement, I was certain I would want to end the marriage as soon as possible. You were a stranger, a human, a reminder of the worst moment of my life. And now? Now you are still a human and still a reminder of that moment, but you are also something else. She struggled for the right words. You are my partner, my friend, someone I trust in a way I did not expect. Jake felt warmth spreading through his chest. I feel the same way about you. So what do we do when the 5 years are over? It was a question neither of them had been willing to ask before, but it hung in the air between them now, demanding an answer. I think, Jake said slowly, that we have 4 more years to figure that out, and I think whatever we decide, we should decide together. Elle nodded slowly. Together, she agreed, that seems appropriate. She reached out and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, nothing romantic or dramatic, just two people who had found something unexpected in each other holding on. Outside, the stars continued their endless dance. The station hummed with the sound of 1,000 species living and working and dreaming side by side. And in one small set of quarters, a human and a princess sat together in comfortable silence, not sure what the future held but willing to face it as partners. It was not the life Jake had planned. It was not the life Elle had expected. But it was their life, and somehow, against all odds, it was beginning to feel like home. The 5th month brought visitors. Jake's mother and sister arrived on a transport ship from Earth, bearing luggage, questions, and the particular energy of family members who have not seen each other in far too long. They had watched the news coverage of his wedding. They had seen the pictures. They had demanded to meet his new wife in person. Jake was terrified. You'll be fine, Elle told him as they waited at the docking port. They are your family. They love you. That's exactly why I'm worried. My mother has opinions, strong opinions about everything. I look forward to meeting someone who can make you this nervous. The airlock opened, and Jake's mother swept through like a force of nature. Was 5 feet nothing of pure determination. With gray hair she refused to die, and a gaze that could make grown men confess to crimes they had not committed. Behind her came his younger sister Emma, taller and calmer but with the same sharp eyes. Jacob Thomas, his mother said, pulling him into a hug that was surprisingly strong for someone her size. You have a lot of explaining to do. Hi, Mom, good to see you too. 6 months. 6 months without a visit, and then I have to find out from the news that my son got married to an alien princess." She pulled back and looked up at him with an expression that was equal parts love and exasperation. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking I preferred marriage to being tortured to death. It seemed like the better option at the time." Emma stepped forward and hugged him too, gentler than their mother. "We're glad you're okay, Jake. When we first heard the story, we were terrified." "I was pretty terrified too." His mother's attention had already shifted to Elle, who stood a few feet away, watching the reunion with obvious curiosity. Walked right up to the 7-foot-tall alien princess and looked her up and down without a trace of intimidation. "So you're the one who shot at my son?" Elle blinked all 4 eyes but did not flinch. "I am. He entered my private chambers without permission." "And then you married him?" "The alternative was his execution." Circled Elle slowly, examining her like she was considering a purchase. "Well, you're taller than I expected, and very pretty in an otherworldly sort of way. Do you treat my son well?" "I try. He is. Not what I expected from a human." "He's not what I expected either, and I raised him." Stopped in front of Elle and held out her hand. Since you're family now, you can call me Mom." Elle looked at the extended hand with something like wonder. Then, slowly, she took it. "I would be honored, Mom." Jake watched this exchange with his mouth hanging open. His mother had just claimed an alien princess as family in less than 2 minutes. It was impressive, even by her standards. Emma came to stand beside him. "She's something else, isn't she?" Emma said, watching their mother drag Elle off toward the guest quarters while talking a mile a minute. "You have no idea." The visit lasted a week. It was simultaneously the best and worst week of Jake's life. His mother had questions. So many questions. About his work, about the station, about the marriage, about his plans for the future. She wanted to know everything, and she had ways of extracting information that would have made professional interrogators jealous. But she also had stories. Stories about Earth, about home, about all the things Jake had missed while he was floating in space fixing communication relays. She brought news of friends and neighbors and relatives, updates on the little town in Colorado that seemed a million light years away. And she brought pictures, embarrassing pictures from Jake's childhood that she insisted on showing Elle despite his protests. "This is Jake at his first baseball game," said, pointing to a photo of a small boy covered in mustard and ketchup. "He got more food on himself than in his mouth." Elle made that wind chime laugh that Jake loved. "He has not changed much then." "Hey," Jake protested weakly. Emma helped too, in her own way. She took Elle on tour of the station's human sections, introduced her to human food beyond coffee, and taught her card games that she picked up with frightening speed. The two of them got along surprisingly well, bonding over a shared appreciation for mockery and strategy. By the end of the week, Elle had been fully absorbed into the family. She had learned to make famous chocolate chip cookies, with some adjustments for alien dietary requirements. She had beaten Emma at poker 17 times in a row. She had listened to stories about Jake's awkward teenage years and filed them away for future ammunition. When the time came for his mother and sister to leave, the goodbyes were harder than Jake expected. "You take care of each other," said, hugging them both at the same time, which required some creative stretching on her part. "And visit, both of you. I want eventually." "Mom," Jake turned bright red. "What? I'm just saying. Mixed species bobbies are possible. I looked it up. The science is very advanced these days." "We'll visit," Elle promised, saving Jake from having to respond to the comment. "Thank you for coming, for accepting me." "Your family now, dear. That's what family does." The transport ship departed, carrying Jake's mother and sister back to Earth. He stood at the viewport and watched until it was nothing but a dot among the stars. Elle stood beside him, her hand finding his. "Your mother is remarkable," she said. That's one word for it. She loves you very much, they both do. Yeah, Jake squeezed her hand. They loved meeting you too, I could tell. Even though I shot at you. Especially because you shot at me. Mom appreciates a woman who can handle herself. Elle laughed, and the sound echoed through the empty corridor. Your family is strange, Jake. I know, but they're mine. He turned to look at her, and now they're yours too if you want them. Her skin shifted to that warm gold color that he had learned to recognize as happiness. I think I do. They walked back to their quarters together, hand in hand, and Jake thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought him here. A wrong door, a moment of accidental exposure, a forced marriage, and somehow, against all logic and probability, a family that was growing larger. Life was strange. Life was unpredictable. Life was occasionally wonderful. And Jake was finally starting to feel like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.